Hi, I'm Salima Shivji, and I'm a reporter here in Mumbai. We're gearing up for the biggest election in history right now, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi looking very likely to win his third term. And whether you love him, hate him, or know nothing about him, there's no denying Modi is one of the most powerful political figures out there right now. Learn why in the newest season of Understood. Modi's India Understood, available now wherever you get your podcasts.
You are listening.
You're listening.
You're listening.
You're listening
To a TVO Today.
TVO Today.
to a TVO Today.
TVO Today
podcast.
The following podcast contains coarse language, descriptions of violence, and sensitive themes which may not be suitable for younger audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Previously on Extradition. Did you ever speak with Hussein's other family, like his mother, his sister, brother?
The guy to talk to here is Mehmet Toti.
Do you believe Hussein is still alive?
The train left already. It is over.
In your sleuthing, it would not be helpful to be trying to contact Hussein's family in Xinjiang. These were my notes from my first meeting with Camila.
Oh, wow.
Latest visit to Hussein in 2012 March. Only allowed to speak from behind window.
不是我就问一下你是不是脑子有问题呢？拿这个电话给我打，然后还问的是一个维吾尔族人，你觉得合适吗？
I feel like the responsible thing to do, if the goal is to have Hussein come back to Canada, is not to just publish it.
It's to tell the government.
It has been 10 long years. My husband Hussein is still in jail in China. I miss him dearly. It has been a real struggle to raise our 4 young boys who have grown up without a dad. Hussein has never met our youngest son Zubair, born 4 months after he was detained. My oldest son Mohammed is severely mentally and physically disabled, and he's now 16 years old. I care for him on my own. It is... I'm so...
In January of 2016, Camila Telendabayeva stood at a podium in a conference room in Ottawa, in front of a bunch of reporters. She's imploring the government to do more to get her husband, Huseyin Celil, home. Alex Neve, former Secretary General of Amnesty International Canada, stood beside her. When she breaks down, Alex gently puts a hand on her shoulder to make sure she's okay. But she wants to keep going.
Abdul is now 12 years old. He loves Raptors and TFC. He's a gifted athlete. His father never seen him in the field. He's now in the provincial team for soccer, and he dreams of playing for TFC one day. Badruddin is now 11 years old, also in school, League for Sports.
Finally, with tears in her eyes, she flips to her last page of notes and makes a plea directly to the Prime Minister of Canada.
Please, Mr. Trudeau, you can help me. I need your help. My husband needs your help. Please.
I'm Yusuf Zine, and this is Extradition, the search for Huseyin Celil. Chapter 6. Dear Hussein. After we discovered that report from Chinese human rights defenders listing Hussein as released, we reached out to them to confirm their source. They responded saying they would reach out to their sources inside the Great Firewall and get back to us. They went quiet for a bit, so we followed up again. Eventually they responded, apologetically, saying delays can happen when contacting their sources in mainland China, especially if they have recently had tea with police or officials, which is a common euphemism for an intimidating visit. A few days later, we went to check their database of prisoners, and to our surprise, Hussein's profile had a new update. Huseyin Celil, in prison, date of release, March 2026. So now, they're saying he's still in prison. Before we had reached out, their website said his sentence was reduced to 15 years, but now it's listed as 20. I also took that release date with a grain of salt. March 2026 would be 20 years since Husein's arrest, but we still didn't know if they were letting him out after 20 years, or if he had to serve a new 20-year sentence. If the latter is true, then his release date would be March 2036. All we had to go off of now was the hope that the Canadian government knew more than we did. We reached out to Global Affairs Canada. In our email, we asked if they could confirm if he was still detained, if he was still alive, and could we interview our Canadian ambassador to China, Jennifer May, and the Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie Joly. We also made separate requests to the Chinese embassy to Canada to interview their ambassador, Tong Pei-Wu. No response there. Global Affairs did respond with the following statement. The Government of Canada has been actively engaged on the case of Mr. Celil since his initial detention. While the Chinese government refuses to recognize Mr. Celil's Canadian citizenship, we have continued to raise his case with Chinese officials at senior levels. Mr. Celil's well-being is top of mind for us. Due to privacy considerations, no further information can be disclosed. We responded with follow-up questions. Actively engaged how? What exactly was their approach to Hussein's case? They responded saying, quote, "We have nothing further to add." With little options left, we reached out to other members of Parliament who had spoken on this case before. Maybe they could give us more insight into what the government meant by actively engaged.
Mr. Celil is a Canadian citizen of Uyghur background who is currently in prison in China. He's been in prison in China for over a decade, and he has not had access to consular services.
Garnett Genus is a Conservative MP for the riding of Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan. He's also the Conservative Shadow Minister for International Development. In August of 2020, he questioned the Liberal government on its progress with the Celil case.
So I want to know what the government's response to those call to actions are.
Parliamentary Secretary Kevin Lamoureux responds. He reads from a piece of paper.
Madam Speaker, Huseyin Celil is a Canadian citizen. As the Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs have consistently stated, the government is seized at all levels by cases of Canadians detained in China, including the long-standing case of Mr. Celil. Mr. Celil has been in detention in Xinjiang since 2006. We recognize and affirm that Mr. Celil is a Canadian. We will continue to advocate for him and make every effort to obtain consular access to him. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I thank the honourable member for speaking from the heart there.
I met Huseyin Celil's wife at an event a number of years ago. I can't recall exactly when it was. It was actually before I had gotten that involved in Uyghur advocacy. And subsequent to that, I got involved in kind of the general issue of Uyghur advocacy, Uyghur genocide recognition, and in the process of that would raise Huseyin Celil's case from time to time. I raised it with then Canadian Ambassador to China, Dominic Barton, at committee. And initially, he appeared to not be aware of the case at all.
Here's the exchange Genus is referring to that took place at a subcommittee hearing in 2020.
Your Excellency, could you share a little bit about your engagement on the Celil case?
On the what?
The Celil case.
Celil?
That's the name of a Canadian detained in China?
Sorry, yes. Yes, who's been in detention for about 15 years. Yes. I've looked into that case, and Huseyin, I call him Huseyin, has basically, because he's not a Canadian citizenship, we are not allowed to provide, we aren't able to get access to him on our consular services side. We've tried, because he's someone I would like to see. I know it's been a standing file.
Yeah, Mr. Celil actually is a Canadian citizen?
Well, I think Canada, the Canadian government has a moral obligation to do all they can to secure the release of Canadian citizens who are unjustly detained abroad.
But what specifically, like in terms of like a legal obligation to secure someone's release? Like what can the Canadian government do?
I think most Canadians would expect, in principle, that the government should do all that it reasonably can in order to secure that release, and that they should also apply a consistency in terms of their efforts to secure the release of Canadians. In terms of what they can do, the petition that we put forward included an ask for a special envoy to be appointed.
In 2022, Gina submitted a petition to the House of Commons calling for a special envoy for Huseyin. A special envoy is a role appointed by the government that takes on a specific case or issue and acts somewhat as an ambassador for it. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, at the time, responded with a statement similar to the one we got, with no mention of a special envoy.
We've also been pushing for tougher laws on Uyghur forced labor. The United States has a much tougher framework for combating Uyghur forced labor in their supply chains.
He's referring to the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act of 2021, which bans any imported goods that are found to have links with forced labor from Xinjiang into the U.S.
They have turned back many shipments of goods over concerns about forced labor. Canada has not permanently stopped a single shipment.
As of recording this in 2024, Canada has no such law like the one in the US, despite many people calling for one. The government of Canada does, however, have a general prohibition on forced labor. Global Affairs Canada also put out an advisory on doing business with Xinjiang-related entities, but they basically put the onus on Canadian businesses to sign a declaration acknowledging Canada's prohibition and to ensure the business takes every step possible to ensure their goods aren't produced with forced labor. But it's unclear how Canada actually enforces this.
So there are many different policy areas where the government still needs to respond, recognizing the genocide, combating forced labor, applying appropriate sanctions, and using all the tools at its disposal to secure the release of Mr. Celil.
To your knowledge, when was the last time the government received news about Huseyin Celil?
There may be information that they haven't shared, but as far as I know, it's been a number of years since there's been any information about Mr. Celil's situation. It continues to be just a brick wall from the government of China. But the fact remains that different tools have been used in different cases. More tools were used in the situation of the two Michaels compared to the situation of Mr. Celil.
The two Michaels were the two Canadians who were detained for more than 1,000 days on allegations of, quote, engaging in activities that threaten China's national security. Many couldn't help comparing the efforts made, this high level of diplomacy and dealing for the two Michaels case, as compared to Huseyin's, or why Canada didn't use that opportunity to include Huseyin in the two Michaels deal. According to Prime Minister Trudeau, a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian, no matter if they were born here or not. We acquired documents that past access to information requests had uncovered about the two Michaels. It showed that Canada had requested meetings with several of their allies, like the US, EU, and the UK, to raise the case in their country's meetings with China. But these documents did not reflect that Huseyin received that same type of advocacy. The documents we received showed no mention of efforts to reach out to our allies for Huseyin's case, in the same way they did for the two Michaels. While the Canadian Liberal government has refused to answer questions on Huseyin's case, they have spoken out about the plight of Uyghurs, and even passed a motion to resettle Uyghurs fleeing China.
What just happened was historic. At this time, Canada is meeting the moment by saying clearly, we will resettle 10,000 Uyghur in third countries as of 2024.
The person who put the motion forward was Samir Zuberi, Liberal MP from the riding of Pierrefonds-Dollard. It may have been historic, and sent a strong diplomatic message to China about the human rights abuses happening in Xinjiang. But the motion that called on Canada's Immigration Department to create a plan to resettle 10,000 Uyghurs didn't seem to amount to much more. We asked Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada for a copy of that resettlement plan. It was just their goals for who would immigrate to Canada in the next 4 years, and Uyghurs are mentioned only as a footnote. Samir Zuberi also sat on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and given his focus on the Uyghur issue, I thought he might have some insight on what the Liberal government meant when they said they were actively engaged on the Celil case.
Canada has tried its utmost best through our ambassador, conversations at the highest levels, in order to secure the rights of Huseyin Celil. China, from the outset, denied his Canadian citizenship.
This is a statement we've also received from Global Affairs Canada, that they continue to raise the case with senior officials in China, and they're actively engaged on the case. Can you help us understand the specifics of that? Like, which senior officials, what are the conversations like?
Well, oftentimes we don't share the details as a country at the same time, because these are part of the mechanisms and the maneuvering that we have to do as a country. So to reveal those conversations is something that wouldn't lead to the positive outcome that we want. But at the end of the day, it's at the will of China in this instance to ensure that his rights are respected. At the end of the day, we can only make representations.
I guess my question is, why is it that this argument from China that he's not a citizen, a Canadian citizen, why does it stop there?
I don't think it should stop there. I mean, he clearly is a Canadian citizen, and we don't have control over what they do. We only have control over what we do as a country.
To your knowledge, what does the government know about Huseyin Celil's current status, like his whereabouts, the length of his sentence, his health? I mean, is he even alive or dead?
I think it's important to talk to Global Affairs about those details.
How can we, though, from the outside looking in, confirm that what Global Affairs Canada is saying is true?
Well, government pays attention to when people are having conversation about any file. If you take the case of Huseyin Celil, it has been publicized over the years. You know, I've seen this case over the years, and it's just I don't know what to do about it.
I don't know what to do about it. It's pretty rare for an elected politician to admit that. And honestly, it's more refreshing than the usual scripted lines we get from Global Affairs. But also, it's pretty disappointing. Didn't exactly give me a strong sense of confidence in our government. I didn't see how sharing details about Huseyin's status with the Canadian public could lead to a negative outcome. I couldn't help but be critical. So, I spoke to someone whose job it was to be a critic.
When we talk about human rights in this place, we need to be honest with ourselves. You don't get to pick and choose human rights. You don't get to choose that the Uyghurs don't matter because we have an economic relationship with China. That is not how human rights works.
The person you're hearing that's slamming Canada's Parliament on human rights is the MP for Edmonton Strathcona and the NDP Foreign Affairs and International Development critic, Heather McPherson.
I also sit on the Canada-China committee. This is a committee that was constituted earlier in this parliament to look at that relationship between Canada and China.
I'm just curious, how much access do you have to Global Affairs Canada intelligence?
Very little. Very little.
Really?
It's a problem that we actually have in this country. Our government provides very little transparency, far less than other like-minded democracies.
So on that note, the Canadian government has said that they are actively engaged on the case of Mr. Celil, and they continue to raise it with Chinese officials at senior levels. How can we confirm that that's true?
We can't confirm that that's true. We don't know what those conversations look like, and we don't have any way of confirming whether or not those conversations have even taken place. It's been years and years and years since Huseyin Celil went missing, and we don't know what the Canadian government is doing to ensure that he, a Canadian citizen, is returned to his wife and his sons. We have to take the government's word for it, and frankly, on a number of different files, from my perspective, I've seen the government prioritize trade relationships over human rights time and time again. So, if this would impact our trade relationship with China, would they be doing the right thing? I'm not 100% confident.
What would you do differently on the Huseyin Celil file, and what tools do you think Canada has at their disposal?
I think that the government has an obligation to share with Canadians, to share with families, to share with parliamentarians what work is being done to ensure that the Canadian citizens are being protected around the world. Making sure that the Chi Michaels are returned, and then basically hoping that we can keep Mr. Celil under a rug and nobody will pay too much attention, except maybe a few pesky politicians will raise it from time to time, and we'll have to, clutch our pearls and be a little, that seems to be not enough. There needs to be a price that China or other countries pay when they don't adhere to international law and they don't treat Canadian citizens equitably.
So if Genus, Zuberi, and McPherson don't know anything about Canada's so-called active engagement on the case, it made me question just how active it really was. Was the plan to just wait out the sentence? I mean, did they even know when his true sentence was up? We requested documents through the Access to Information Act for anything related to the Celil case. They sent back hundreds of pages. But these documents only showed 2 high-level meetings where Husein's case was raised between our ministers of foreign affairs. And little seemed to be accomplished in those meetings. Nothing about sanctions, a special envoy to the case of Huseyin Celil, or a strategy to get him released. Maybe to the Canadian government, it's just one person, one name, one case file on a long to-do list that keeps growing longer. But to the Uyghur community, freeing a man like Huseyin Celil is so much more.
It's really important. It's more important than 10,000 Uyghurs because it's hope.
Abdoueli Ayub was one of the first Uyghur refugees we spoke to about life in a Xinjiang prison.
Look, if you are Canadian, if you are part of this society, they will stand for you, they will fight for you. For me, for Uyghur people in my homeland, it's really important that poor guy saved from that #1 prison. We need hope right now. We need hope. We need somebody can help us. Not all of us, just one. If Canada can save Huseyin Celil, it means that Uyghur people will be saved.
Hello everyone, my name is Shaida Ali. Today is the 45th month of my father's illegal detention. This is my father, Elijah Mahmoud, and he was illegally arrested and taken to the concentration camp on May 2017. I asked Chinese government, where is my father? Release my father immediately.
This is a video testimony from the YouTube channel Uyghur Pulse. It was created by Jean Bunin, the man who gave us the phone numbers to the #1 prison, and is sort of a companion piece to the Xinjiang Victims Database. There are thousands of videos of sons, daughters, brothers, and wives who have had family members disappear into China's detention system.
3 long years after my father's disappearance, the Chinese government sentenced him in life in prison for being separatist. My father has never committed any crimes.
I'm going to testify about my brother, Nirmatullah Khuja. He has been taken away by the Chinese police almost 2 years ago. Since then, there's no news about him.
The videos are heartbreaking to watch. In every video, the person holds up a photo of their loved one. The stories are always the same.
This is my mother, Surya Tursun. She is serving in Chinese concentration camp. Please help me. Raise my voice to save my mom.
China has arrested my father, Yalqin Rozi. My father was punished because he worked tirelessly to preserve Uyghur culture and
My name is
language.
Najmuddin Rahman. My grandfather was taken to Chinese government's detention.
I have lost contact with my family members back home since the 18th.
Hi, my name is Maya Mitalipa. Today I want to testify for my missing relatives.
My father, Sadr Ali, was detained to concentration camp.
My beloved Professor Ilham Tohti. I hope he is healthy. I hope he is safe in Chinese prison.
Abduweli had also submitted a testimony through Uyghur Pulse. He talked about his former professor, a Uyghur man named Ilham Tohti. Tohti was an economist, lecturer, and activist. He co-founded the website Uyghur Online, which promoted the understanding between Uyghurs and Han Chinese. He's also serving a sentence at the Xinjiang No. 1 prison.
My father now is serving a life sentence since 2014. I haven't heard a word from my father since 2017. I have been actively campaigning for the release of my father since he was arrested.
This is his daughter, Johar Ilham. We reached out to her to hear more about her story.
When they first arrested my dad, they didn't even give any reasons. They didn't even give why he was charged.
In February of 2013, Ilham Tohti received a one-year fellowship to teach in America at Indiana University. They were living in China at the time, and Johar was only 18. But when they arrived at the Beijing International Airport, Ilham was stopped at the border by Chinese officials.
And he believed that that was going to be my last chance to leave the country and to be safe. And he was right. I'm the only one in my family that's safe and abroad right now. He was arrested in front of my eyes. The last thing he told me before we said goodbye was, look around you, look how this country is treating you. Do you really want to stay here? And because I was tearing up, crying so much, and he said, don't cry in front of them. Don't let them think Uyghur girls are weak. We are strong. Until now, the Chinese government has not been able to provide one single valid evidence to prove all these so-called charges, because he was someone who advocates for violence and he was an extremist, which is all completely opposite of what he is or how he is.
Johar continues to fight for her father's release and advocates for other Uyghurs in similar positions.
I just hope whoever is listening to this out there, doesn't matter if you're Uyghur or not, don't lose hope. Don't lose hope. My dad once said something to me. He said that there's no eternity for anything. Now, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. So if you're really enjoying your life, cherish it. And for those who have their loved ones, pick up a phone and call them and tell them you really care about them and you love them, because many people in this world, they can't do that. By picking up a phone call and calling their families could put them in danger. So don't let go of that opportunity.
喂，你好。你好，我是玉江山吉利利他家人。
With the Canadian government being yet another dead end for info on Huseyin, we went back to our only strategy, calling the No. 1 prison staff again.
可以跟你确认一下那个监狱的地址吗？
This time, we decided to ask for an exact address to reach Huseyin. Perhaps the prison staff might give it to us, indirectly confirming if he was still in prison or if he'd been released.
你觉得你脑子是不是有点问题啊？
为什么我脑子有问题？
The guard asks if our translator has something wrong with their brain. He then demands our cell number.
来，你把你手机号报给我。
不是那个，我是在这边用，因为我
要你手机号。
He keeps demanding our cell number.
我用的是网络电话打的，因为他的家人在国外很长时间。干些不要脸的
事情，干些他妈的搞特务的事情，你在这打什么电话呢？
He wasn't happy to get our call. He says, "What are you doing with this phone call? Trying to do something shameless? You trying to be some fucking spy?"
没有，因为他家里人很久没有跟他见了，所以想跟他联系一下。
你不要扯淡，你能报出来你。
Our translator denies they're spying and says that we were calling because Hussein's family hasn't seen him for so long.
我问你能不能报？
The guard tells us to stop bullshitting and keeps asking for the number. Our translator tells him that they can't give him a phone number.
我不能报。
臭不要脸，干些他妈的特务的事情。
He accuses us of calling every day, which we weren't. He again calls our translator shameless and accuses them of being a spy. And if we give him our ID number, he'll find Hussein for us. And then he calls us an idiot.
So aggressive.
By this point, we were pretty used to people yelling at us and calling us idiots.
喂，你好。
你好。哦，不好意思，大早打扰你。
Our translator starts our next call by apologizing for calling so early in the morning. They ask if they could confirm the address of the prison that Huseyin Celil is in.
你怎么有我的电话？
哦，我是在网上找到的。
The man asks where we got his number.
网上？哪个网上？
They tell him we couldn't remember the name of the website we got it from, but we wouldn't call him this early for no reason.
啊，对对对。
Surprisingly, the man seems to agree.
您是那个新疆第一监狱的工作人员吗？
Our translator asks if he's a staffer at the number 1 prison.
你觉得我是吗？
The man says, "What do you think?" and laughs.
不好意思，我现在有点忙哦。
The guard then apologizes
那再说吧啊。
and asks if we can revisit this later, a polite way in Chinese of saying, "Let's not discuss this."
真的拜托，想跟您确认。
Feeling like we were losing him, our translator makes an emotional appeal, telling the man that Hussein has kids who haven't seen him, asking if he's a father himself.
他有4个儿子，我不知道您是不是做父亲，就是他小儿子可能跟他太久没有见过面了。
你在哪个地方？
The guard asks where the translator is from. They tell him.
哦。
But unlike other calls where we tell them our location, he didn't freak out or get angry.
我觉得你打错电话了，你知道吗？
But he tells us we have the wrong number and hangs up.
I tried. He was really friendly.
He said that, I'm sorry, I think you're calling the wrong number. He just didn't want to say. But he was very kind. Like
very kind.
You're like, we wouldn't call you this early if we weren't desperate or something, or like if we weren't looking for information. And he's like, that's true.
Wow.
Yeah. Right?
That kind of warmed my heart.
That really did.
And for a split second, I was thinking maybe he's going to spill something.
I really thought he was about to.
It was nice to speak to someone who didn't yell at us or question the faculties of our brain. It almost sounded like he wanted to help us, but knew that he couldn't. Before we closed the books on the calls, we gave the prison main line another try.
Okay, I'm ready.
Hey, 你好。
你好，您这边是新疆第一监狱吗？
对。
Our translator first confirms if this is the right number, the number 1 prison. Then they say that they're a friend looking to send a letter to Huseyin Celil and wanted to confirm the address.
不可以。
为什么不可以？
The man then says it's not possible to talk to us. When our translator asked why, he said he didn't need to explain why.
那您能给我们确认一下地址吗？
地址你不知道吗？你是他朋友。
The translator asks again if he can confirm the address for us. The person fires back, asking, "How could you not know the address if you're his friend?" He seemed to be on to us, but our translator said we just wanted the specific address, so we knew exactly where to send the letter.
那你让他家里人跟我们联系吧，好不好？我们这边只接受亲属的。
He says that he can't speak to us, since we're not family. He says, have his family call us. We only accept relatives. This next part was a shock. Our translator asked the man if he has heard of Huseyin Celil.
我知道。
The man responds, I know him. At this point, our translator shot us a big thumbs up, excited that someone at the #1 prison, for the first time, acknowledged they knew who Huseyin was. Our translator goes on to continue to get more of a confirmation. They ask if he's in the prison right now.
你是哪的？
But the man turns the questions back on us and asks where we're calling from. We tell him.
你让他们家属跟我们联系吧，好不好？
He tells us again to ask Husein's family to get in touch with them. The translator asks a second time if Huseyin is there. He says,
你们这个朋友我们没法给你答复。
You're just a friend, and I can't give you a reply. Our translator won't let up. They ask a third time. But he's there, right?
我不知道。
The man now says he doesn't know. So we end the call. Part of me wanted to keep calling. For over 2 years, I'd become obsessed with wanting to find Huseyin Celil. But the message we got from the #1 prison was clear. This was a family matter, and I wasn't family. I was just a stubborn podcaster with lofty ambitions of getting a scoop. Maybe these phone numbers were never meant for us. Maybe this whole time, they were meant for someone else to call.
I cry every day, like 3-4 times when I think about this case, when I think about my husband.
This is one of the last interviews Kamila Telendabayeva did with Global News in 2021.
When they were little, they were asking every day, they were asking why he's in China. I went through so many difficult times. Now when I see them, how they are preparing themselves to university, it's amazing, you know, it's amazing, you know. I'm proud, but something is missing. Something is missing in my life, you know. Main person is missing in the family. That hurts a lot.
Kamila still wasn't speaking publicly anymore, but I had her contact information, so I decided to send her a note. The note read, Dear Kamila, enclosed are the numbers to the Xinjiang No. prison, the jail where your husband is being held. The first number on the list is the main line to the prison, and they told us they knew about him, but could only speak with the family. There was even one person we spoke to who was actually pretty nice. Maybe he might tell you something. He's number 20 on the list. I hope they speak to you and answer any of your questions, or, at the very least, bring you some solace. But if you choose not to call, then I understand that decision too.
One day he's gonna come back, and then so we can continue the life together.
Our search for Huseyin Celil had ended, but there was still one last thing I wanted to do. When we called the #1 prison, we told them we wanted the address so we could send a letter to Huseyin. But since we actually already knew the address, I figured, why not? So, I wrote one. Dear Huseyin, my name is Yusuf Zine. You don't know me, but for the last 2.5 years, I've been looking for you. Our team and I wanted to see how far we could go to find information about your status, your location, and your well-being. We spoke to a lot of people for answers. Your family's lawyer, Chris McLeod, who helped us piece together your story. He held an optimism that few others did.
Absolute certainty, I am convinced. Huseyin will be back, and he'll be back sooner rather than later.
Canadian government officials like Peter MacKay, who failed to bring you home all those years ago.
Do I feel let down and that I didn't complete the mission? Yes, that's exactly right.
We even tried calling the prison that you're in, hoping that one of the staff would tell us something.
不是，我就问一下，你是不是脑子有问题呢？拿这个电话给我打，然后还问的是一个维吾尔族人，你觉得合适吗？
Yeah, that didn't go so well. But throughout this experience, we learned a lot about the system you're in today. How China is cracking down on millions of Uyghurs and placing them in prisons and so-called re-education camps, simply for the crime of being Muslim. How the ominous shadow of the Chinese government looms over every Uyghur around the world, and how any outspoken Uyghur, like yourself, can be labeled as a terrorist. We learn the challenges of getting powerful people to be honest about what they're doing to support those in unjust situations, the ways powerful people in China and Canada keep others who could talk to us quiet through intimidation or laws.
You know, I've seen this case over the years, and it's just I don't know what to do about it.
I wasn't left with a complete lack of hope, because what I did find in my search was a group of people who have not stopped fighting. We met a man named Jean Bunin. He's the one who gave us the phone numbers to the jail. He still continues to update and track other Uyghurs like you who are detained in Xinjiang, giving families a resource to find their own loved ones.
Somebody was afraid to speak up about what was happening to their family, they might be less afraid to do so if they saw that, thousands of other people had already spoken up.
We met a Uyghur woman, Joer Ilham, whose father is in the same jail as you. Maybe you know him, Ilham Tohti. His daughter speaks internationally on the plight of Uyghur persecution, and has this beautiful strength in the hope that she'll see her father again someday. It was moving.
I try my best every day to make my father's name heard in different communities, different people's ears, different platforms. I'm trying my best.
There's also some great people with Amnesty International Canada. People like Alex Neve, the former Secretary General.
I'm confident he's alive. I am also confident that we will eventually see him in Canada.
And Wilf Ruland, who continues to keep the campaign for your release alive to this day.
It's gratifying that the people in the groups are motivated and I'm motivated, and we just keep plugging away.
And then there's Camilla, your wife. She's been fighting for your release since the day she came back to Canada without you. It's amazing, really. I don't know how she does it. Having been working on this case for barely 3 years, I've had so many moments of wanting to give up, feeling like this was a pointless exercise. But Camilla has been doing it for 17 years, all while raising your 4 boys. I haven't met her, but I do hope I will someday. And I hope I'll meet you too. I think we'd have a lot to talk about. But until that day comes, know that there are Canadians here who are still fighting to keep your name and your story alive. And maybe this podcast, if nothing else, will contribute to that. Oh, and if by chance one of the guards at the #1 prison is reading this, thanks for taking our calls. Stay strong, Huseyin, and hold on to hope. There's a lot of people here waiting for you. Sincerely yours, the team of Extradition. The search for Huseyin Celil. Extradition is written and produced by me, Yusuf Zine, and Kevin Young. Tiffany Lamb is our producer and editor for TVO Today podcasts. Kevin Young is also our audio engineer. Our story editor is Michelle Shepard. Our legal counsel is Willa Marcus. Production support from Jonathan Hallowell, Ariana Longley, Vito Tagarelli, Jeff Kusura, and Jennifer DeRosa. Artwork by Jasmine L. Kurd. Katie O'Connor is managing editor for podcasts and digital video at TVO Today. Our executive producer of digital for TVO Today is Lori Few. John Ferry is vice president of programming and content for TVO Today. Theme song and music by Blue Dot Sessions and Audio Network. Special thanks to all the remarkable journalists who came before us, whose reporting on this case helped pave the way for our series. A huge thanks to everyone who spoke to us and participated in our investigation, especially those who took a risk doing so. And finally, thank you for listening. Extradition is produced by Interspeak and TVO Today.